We begin with this tonight. Is the drug that is used to kill dogs and cats in your dog's food? It is a question that senior investigative reporter Lisa Fletcher set out to answer 7 months ago.
Well, tonight we have her explosive results, and Lisa is here with that now. Lisa?
Allison and John, the FDA just confirmed it will investigate and take enforcement action against the company we're exposing as having the euthanasia drug Pentobarbital in its food. And while that is an excellent proactive response, the agency charged with protecting what we and our pets consume has a poor history of keeping pet food free of contaminants.
Nobody should have to go through what we went through. Nobody. It's not fair. I mean, I would give anything to see Tallulah again.
New Year's Eve 2016 was no celebration for Nikki Mail and her family.
They were falling over, they were running into the walls, they were convulsing.
Within minutes of sharing a can of Evinger's pet food among her 5 dogs, she was racing the lifeless animals to the emergency vet.
They said that they weren't sure that what was going on, but it didn't look good.
Hours later, devastating news.
They said that Tallulah wasn't going to make it.
Desperate for answers, they sent the remainder of the food to a specialized lab and drove Tallulah's lifeless body to a veterinary pathologist for a post-mortem examination.
Poisoning from the dog food, that's what killed her.
But it wasn't just any poison. It was Pentobarbital, a lethal drug most commonly used to euthanize dogs, cats, and some horses. The deadly toxin is never permitted to kill animals that are part of the food supply and would violate federal law if it was.
Pet food violates federal law, is openly allowed by the FDA to violate federal law. Billion-dollar-a-year companies are making profit selling illegal adulterated products to unknowing consumers in the U.S. every day.
Susan Thixton has been studying and writing about the pet food industry for decades.
Do consumers have the information they need to make safe choices about pet food?
They have no information. A consumer has to become a private detective to learn what's really in their food.
So we decided to find out. We partnered with Ellipse Analytics, a lab that specializes in testing food for contaminants. Founder Kevin Hicks.
I think you have a duty to understand what you're selling to human beings and pets. And I think that the obligation is on you to understand what is and is not in your product.
We tested 62 samples of wet dog food across more than 24 brands for the euthanasia drug Pentobarbital. After months of tests and retests, one brand came back positive for Pentobarbital over and over again. In total, we tested 15 cans of Gravy Train. 9 cans, 60% of the sample, were positive for Pentobarbital. And while the levels detected were not lethal, under federal law, they are also not permitted at any concentration. Gravy Train is made by Big Heart Pet Foods and owned by Smuckers. According to Nielsen data, it accounts for more than $40 million of the company's annual revenue. Their website touts high-quality food that meets rigorous evaluation and testing requirements. So, how is Pentobarbital, a drug not allowed to be used on animals intended for food, getting into the food?
It comes from euthanasia of animals using that euthanasia drug. So these animals could be dogs, they could be cats, they could be horses. But how is it getting into the pet food? If they say it doesn't come from dogs and cats and horses, where does it come from? It doesn't come from outer space.
Dr. Nicholas Dodman is the Chief Scientific Officer for the Center for Canine Behavior Studies. He is the former director of the Animal Behavior Program at Tufts University. He says the level of Pentobarbital in the food is really beside the point.
Whether it's doing something or nothing, what's it doing there? Where did it come from? If they don't like the explanation is coming from animals that have been euthanized, what is their explanation as to how it gets in there?
A question neither the FDA nor Smuckers would answer. One possibility? Experts tell us the animals that have been euthanized are picked up by renderers who process the carcasses, which may be blended into pet food. In a 2004 report to Congress, sources for rendered materials were identified as, among other things, dead animals from farms, animal shelters, and other facilities. Under federal law, these are adulterated ingredients. Adulterated ingredients, which are defined partly as an animal which has died otherwise than by slaughter, are illegal in all food for humans and animals. Yet in its own compliance policy, the FDA acknowledges it is violating the law and states pet food consisting of material from diseased animals or animals which have died otherwise than by slaughter, which is in violation of 402A5, will be considered fit for animal consumption.
FDA tells industry, yeah, it's a violation of law, but go ahead, we're not going to do anything.
We asked the FDA to explain its policy that is allowing adulterated ingredients into pet food. They declined. We asked Smucker's to answer a series of questions about its quality control, suppliers, and testing of its products. The company chose not to respond to any of our questions, but did provide a written statement that, in part, says, "We launched and are conducting a thorough investigation, including working closely with our suppliers to determine the accuracy of these results and the methodology used."
I don't trust any dog food companies anymore, and reading that the law is not enforced and it's just kind of, they kind of do their own thing, I need to make sure that they're eating human grade food.
Since Tallulah's death, Nikki's been making pet food at home, so she knows exactly what's in it.
I miss Tallulah a lot. Not fair. But I hope that other animals can be saved by this.
FDA tests show is responsible for Tallulah's death. Our tests came back negative. You can read full responses from both Smucker's and the FDA on the ABC7 smartphone app or on our website. We've posted the questions that we posed to both that went unanswered. If you're concerned about pet food safety, you can call the FDA, Smucker's, and their subsidiary Big Heart Brands, which makes Gravy Train. You will find all of that information on our app as well.
So, Lisa, you mentioned there that Smucker's says they're looking into the accuracy of your results. So tell us, who did your testing?
So we used two highly accredited analytical labs, one of which the FDA used when pentobarbital was discovered last year. Each product was tested at least twice to make sure our results were accurate.
Tonight, reaction from Congress. Senior investigative reporter Lisa Fletcher joins us now with the details. And Lisa, you discovered the euthanasia drug Pentobarbital in Gravy Train dog food?
We did. Now, it was not in lethal levels, but under federal law, it is not allowed to be there, period. This was a 7-month investigation into what actually ends up in pet food. This wasn't the first time the euthanasia drug Pentobarbital was discovered, but we're hoping, as a result of our investigation, it's the last.
We've found the drug that is used to kill cats and dogs in their food. What do you make of all of this?
To think that any living creature would be subjected to that is very, very daunting, very troubling. I think that it's a situation that demands first investigation, but certainly labeling and regulation, which is a word that's not too popular in Washington right now.
Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur has been pushing for accurate food labeling for pets and people for years. She's fighting to force industry to be transparent about what's in the product and from where it's sourced. Otherwise, consumers are flying blind.
I can tell you in the area of food safety, be it for pets or humans, all kinds of animals, you are talking about a really hard road because there is such resistance from the companies, the manufacturers, to disrupt their process.
In 2007, after the chemical melamine was found in pet food that killed or sickened thousands of cats and dogs, Congress instructed the FDA to improve regulations for pet food safety, ingredient standards, processing, and labeling. They gave the FDA until September 2009 to get the job done.
And it isn't done.
Which raises two questions. Why isn't it done? And why is there no hammer coming down from Congress?
There's a great deal of pushback in the Congress for any kind of a labeling of food consumption. There's a lot of pressure exerted in Congress not to do that.
Where's the pressure coming from?
From the industry, from manufacturers, from those that don't want to be held responsible for what they do.
Congresswoman Kaptur's office tells us she will be keeping an eye on the FDA investigation and will coordinate with her colleagues in Congress to ensure that all parties are held to account.
You know, Lisa, you had a great piece last night. Some of our audience may have missed that. How is the pentobarbital getting into the food? Do we know that?
Well, the answer to that is going to require a robust investigation from the FDA, not just a penalty and a fine. You know, one of the possibilities, of course, for the way that the drug is getting into food is that euthanized animals, which would primarily be dogs, cats, and horses, are somehow getting into the supply chain, because pentobarbital is never used on animals intended for food, human or pet. That would be illegal.
What's the latest?
A couple of things. This class action lawsuit, it was just filed in U.S. District Court in California against Big Heart Brands. That's the company that makes Gravy Train, and is owned by Smuckers. The suit alleges the company knowingly, recklessly, and/or negligently is selling contaminated dog food containing pentobarbital, a substance largely used to euthanize animals. And of course, as we pointed out in our initial investigation, pentobarbital would never be used on animals intended for food, as that would be illegal. So, where is it coming from?
It comes from euthanasia of animals using that euthanasia drug. So if they say it doesn't come from dogs and cats and horses, where does it come from? It doesn't come from outer space.
Also today on the Gravy Train website, a new posting for consumers. The company says no euthanized animals or pets are in their food per AAFCO standards. Sounds official, but AAFCO is an industry association that is neither governmental nor regulatory. In fact, AAFCO has definitions for ingredients that consumers are not privy to unless you buy this book, which is $100 a year. An example, meat and bone meal is defined as the rendered product from mammal tissues. Question remains, what mammals and where did they come from?
A 7 on Your Side investigation leads to 31 dog foods being pulled off the shelves nationwide tonight. Senior investigative reporter Lisa Fletcher broke this story last Thursday, and here now with quite a result.
The FDA launched an investigation after our report, and tonight Smuckers, the owner of most of the brands of dog food in question, removing products from retailers. Products in the Gravy Train, Kibbles and Bits, Skippy, and Old Roy lines coming off the shelves. Retailers across the country removing the food, including the nation's largest, Walmart, in all 4,700 of its stores. For 7 months, we investigated what's in dog food. Hundreds of tests across dozens of products.
Consumers, they're tired of their pets dying. You know, they're tired of being worried, and this needs to change.
Susan Thixton has been researching and writing about the pet food industry for years. She says based on current labeling standards, it's impossible for you to know what you're really feeding your pet. Do consumers have the information they need to make safe choices about pet food?
They have no information. A consumer has to become a private detective to learn what's really in their food.
Among our tests were 15 cans of Gravy Train, made by Big Heart Brands, a subsidiary of Smuckers. 9 cans, 60% of the sample, repeatedly tested positive for the euthanasia drug pentobarbital. And while the levels detected were not lethal, under federal law, it is not permitted at any level and never allowed to be used on animals intended for food.
Where did it come from? If they don't like, the explanations coming from animals that have been euthanized, what is their explanation as to how it gets in there?
Smuckers posted on its website that it does not use pets in its food. The company would not answer any of the questions we provided to them, including how is pentobarbital getting into their supply chain. While all of our positive tests came back on Gravy Train, Smuckers has not explained why it has expanded the number of brands being pulled from the shelves. But it's possible that the brands share a supplier. We also asked Smuckers about that today and did not receive a response.
Our senior investigative reporter Lisa Fletcher worked on this story for 7 months. She broke it last week, and Lisa, you're already getting very quick results with this one.
We have been. Really, the most important of which is that all of the products, a total of 31 varieties of canned dog food, pulled from shelves nationwide. Today, the FDA releasing this alert, warning pet owners about the products that were removed from stores that include Gravy Train, Kibbles and Bits, Old Roy, and Skippy dog food. The FDA is continuing its investigation into the contamination. Something important to remember, even though the levels of pentobarbital we discovered were not lethal, it is illegal for any amount of that drug to be in the food. And even more importantly, it raises the question, how is it getting in there in the first place? It is never allowed to be used on animals intended for food. The overwhelming use of pentobarbital is to euthanize cats, dogs, and some horses. Hundreds of media organizations have carried our story, and with it, people from across the country are following how Smuckers, the brand owner, and the FDA are handling the pentobarbital contamination.
Different lots, different stores, same problem. A lethal drug used to primarily kill cats and dogs, never allowed to be used on animals in the food supply, showing up in what you feed your pets.
Say, where does it come from? It comes from euthanasia of animals using that euthanasia drug. So these animals could be dogs, they could be cats, they could be horses. But how is it getting into the pet food?
Dr. Nicholas Dodman is the former director of the Animal Behavior Program at Tufts University.
Best case scenario for pet food companies is they're unaware. Maybe that is their state of knowledge, they do not know. But someone further down that chain is slipping these things in and it's getting there.
While the levels we discovered were not lethal, pentobarbital is never permitted in the food supply at any concentration. Smucker's has reported the source of the pentobarbital as beef fat from cattle and no other animal. Problem is, beef fat isn't even an ingredient on the label. Smucker's says the beef fat was in animal fat, yet the company won't say what, if any, other animals they tested for.
There are things that seem to be missing in their report.
Dr. Sean Callan is the Director of Operations and Quality at Ellipse Analytics, the lab that conducted our tests for pentobarbital.
The thing about DNA testing is you have to sort of decide ahead of time what you want to look for. So if you decide that you want to look for beef and ocelot and unicorn, and then you can say, yep, we only found beef. But did you look for horse? Did you look for canine? Did you look for feline? It'd be nice to know these things.
We asked Smucker's what animals they looked for in the DNA test. They would not answer, raising the question, did they instruct the lab to look for commonly euthanized animals like dog, cat, and horse? If they didn't, it would not be found. Smucker's issued a withdrawal of more than 30 types of Gravy Train, Kibbles and Bits, Skippy, and Old Roy canned dog food. A withdrawal serves the same end as a recall. The product comes off the shelves in every store in America. So why not call it a recall? The FDA tells us it was the fastest way to get the products out of stores.
The fact that this is a withdrawal and it's technically a recall is not how the law is supposed to work.
Bill Marler is one of America's premier foodborne illness attorneys.
I think it's a PR stunt. I think it sounds better that it's a withdrawal as opposed to a recall. A withdrawal is these companies still have control of the product. A recall is a specific scenario where the product is in people's homes. They've already fed it to their children or their animals, and that product needs to be completely pulled out of the stream of commerce.
We've asked both Smucker's and the FDA how many cans of food were pulled off shelves. They declined to answer. A food industry executive who's overseen a number of national recalls conservatively estimated that number at more than 40 million. Smucker's tells us as a result of our story, it will test all products for the presence of pentobarbital. Dr. Callan says that's an excellent first step, but warns without more information, the results could be misleading.
It would be nice to know, again, how sensitive their test is going to be. You can look for pentobarbital with a really insensitive measure and never find it. But if you're looking for it with the level of rigor you need in order to really rule out its presence, that's a little bit harder to do.
We shared all of our lab data, methods, and protocols with Smucker's. We asked them to share theirs with us so our scientists could look it over. They declined. They actually declined to answer all but one of our latest questions. You can see all of that on our website.
Wow, you're back here in the studio. Lisa, a lot of things have happened as a result of your story.
Yeah, I wish we had time to talk about all of them. One of the things that has happened, though, is an online petition has launched to encourage Smucker's to recall all its pet food and upgrade its production standards. That petition has nearly 105,000 signatures, and what's important about that is consumers are speaking out. And it's not just Smucker's getting the message. These are the kinds of things that can drive industry-wide reform.
The recalled food is still on shelves.
Whether it's a brick and mortar store or a quick trip down the cyber aisle, recalled dog food containing the euthanasia drug pentobarbital may still find its way into your home.
For a lot of businesses, it's a dollar and cents issue, so they want to keep trying to sell whatever they have.
Jessica Slater is an attorney representing the family whose dog died after eating Evinger's dog food. That brand was recalled in early 2017 for containing the euthanasia drug pentobarbital. Despite a recall more than 2 weeks ago, just days ago, we bought 42 cans of Gravy Train from a discount store. The lot numbers matching those recalled for pentobarbital contamination. The cans on sale for $1 each. Compared to the normal $2.59, it would seem a good bargain for an unwitting customer.
I think a lot of companies, if they're smart, they will want to gain the trust of their customers. And when people find out stuff like that, maybe they don't want to shop there anymore.
We also ordered the recalled dog food products off of Amazon, eBay, and the grocery site Food Service Direct. All three showed the UPC codes for products the FDA says are contaminated with pentobarbital. But even when the FDA is involved, there's no guarantee all products will be removed from shelves or that manufacturers will be held to meaningful account. In the case of Evangers, which involved a 3-brand recall, the death of a dog, the discovery of horse meat in the product, and lethal levels of pentobarbital, the FDA recently closed that case with a warning letter to Evangers, but no other penalty.
When something like this kind of gets exposed and there's been a recall, people expect there to be a punishment. It's a little bit hard to understand what kind of accountability is out there for these pet food companies when there is no kind of penalty.
We asked the FDA why the case against Evangers was closed with no enforcement action. They told us because the firm is no longer using that facility to manufacture animal foods, and said they will continue to inspect the facility Evangers is now using.
And Lisa Fletcher joining us now. Now, Lisa, both Evangers and Smuckers violated federal regulations by having this euthanasia drug in their foods.
Right.
We know that Evangers face no punishment. What does this mean for Smuckers? Are they off the hook?
It's a great question, and obviously we're not going to know until the FDA acts, but a number of class action attorneys have told us this is precisely why more people are turning to the courts, because they just don't think justice is being served. So far, 6 class actions have been filed. Now, we contacted the retailers. Amazon and eBay tell us they're on it, and they're going to make sure the products are removed or flagged. We did not hear back from Food Service Direct.
And now, legislation at the state level that would give power to enforce pet food safety and punish lawbreakers when the FDA won't.
When Ohio State Representative Laura Lanise found out pentobarbital, used to euthanize animals, was in pet food, she immediately took action.
This was brought to my attention after the outbreak of your story. I found that this issue is not specifically addressed in the law. The meat rendering plants are able to put in whatever they would like.
She and attorney Dana Marie Piniella drafted a bill that bans companies from making or selling pet food in Ohio that contains any part of a euthanized animal.
Under this bill, any pet food that contains the bodies of animals euthanized by drugs, so that could be pentobarbital or any other substance, as well as the body of any killed dog or cat.
They say they've specifically added dog or cat because dog and cat are permitted in pet food in Ohio, and they're not banned as ingredients for the entire pet food industry.
That was pretty shocking to me to see that that law was specifically allowing that process to occur.
While it's already a violation of federal law to have euthanized animals or adulterated ingredients in the food supply for animals or people, the FDA willfully permits manufacturers to violate that law. Its own compliance policy states pet food consisting of material from diseased animals or animals which have died otherwise than by slaughter, which is in violation of 402A5, will be considered fit for animal consumption.
The FDA has done nothing about this issue for 20 years, and they've known about it. I believe it's a slap in the face to pet owners, pet lovers, that the FDA is violating their own policies in this manner.
Representative Lanise says her constituents want this kind of law in Ohio, and other states are already looking to blueprint it. That's significant because it could force manufacturers to change their practices across the board rather than make a cleaner product for just one state. Smuckers says it supports the bill.
Are you anticipating any pushback to this bill?
Not at all, especially because these companies are saying it's not happening. So if it's not happening, there should be no pushback whatsoever.
Ohio is home to Smuckers, the subject of our investigation that resulted in the recall of 107 million cans of dog food for containing the euthanasia drug pentobarbital. Piniella says if HB 560 was already in effect, Smuckers would be punished for allowing pentobarbital into its products. Representative Lanise says she's hoping the bill will move quickly through both chambers and to the governor's desk. Within hours of our investigation, the FDA launched its own into Smucker's subsidiary Big Heart Brands, the makers of Gravy Train, Kibbles and Bits, Old Roy, and Skippy dog foods. At issue, a rendered fat ingredient that is the boiled byproduct of carcasses that contain the euthanasia drug pentobarbital.
The latest class action lawsuit against the company alleges that the FDA found pentobarbital in the company's fat supply at levels at least 80 times higher than what we discovered in products on the shelves, and that the company retained a sample of that fat from a full year earlier in 2017, with levels of pentobarbital more than 50 times higher than our results that prompted the recall. Attorney Rebecca Peterson.
It is an important fact because they retained it, yet they didn't test it, or they did test it, and yet they still went forward by including that tallow in the contaminated dog food.
From the onset, the company maintained that the pentobarbital was not to be of concern to consumers. It characterized the levels in pet food as extremely low. Pentobarbital is illegal at any level, as it is a lethal drug. The company states its top priority is the safety and quality of its products. The revelation that pentobarbital has existed in the company's supply chain for more than a year appears to contradict its assurance to consumers of a comprehensive testing program that is used to assess the safety and quality of ingredients upon receipt. An unsurprising contradiction to food safety attorney Bill Marler.
Sometimes industry just doesn't want to be transparent. And I think they missed the boat because consumers are pretty understanding of mistakes that get made in the food supply. They aren't so understanding when they think that the government and the industry are hiding things from them.
In a statement, Smucker's did not address the failures of its previous comprehensive testing program, but told us that although the company has robust quality assurance procedures in place, we are committed to enhancing sourcing and supplier oversight procedures to help ensure this does not happen again. Court documents allege the source of contaminated fat as the company's supplier, JBS, itself the subject of investigations and recalls for everything from E. coli and the inhumane treatment of animals to rotten meat and product contamination dating back to at least 2009. In a statement, JBS did not address those issues, but stated it has modified its procurement process and will divert all third-party sourced materials to non-edible production until the company can ensure these materials meet its high standards for quality and safety. Peterson says they're seeking more than remedies for affected consumers.
That these companies become transparent and honest as to what they're including in the dog food. Pets are viewed as family, and consumers want to know and expect that these companies are transparent and honest in what they put on their labels.
Financial reports released just this week from the J.M. Smucker's company, and they include losses attributed to the results of an ABC7 investigation.
That's right. Smucker's stock hit a 52-week low this week as it released its fourth quarter earnings. Smucker's was the subject of an ABC7 investigation into the euthanasia drug pentobarbital that we discovered in some of their dog food. And while the levels were not lethal, it is a violation of federal regulations for the drug to be present at any level. As a result, the FDA launched an investigation, and 107 million cans of Gravy Train, Kibbles and Bits, Skippy, and Old Roy dog foods were pulled from the shelves. The company's fiscal report says the recall contributed to reduced earnings per share by 10 cents, amounting to about $11.4 million in reduced value. The FDA continues its investigation. We will keep you updated as this story unfolds.
Tonight, word that this problem may be bigger than the agency originally thought. Senior investigative reporter Lisa Fletcher broke this story and has an update tonight.
Dr. Stephen Solomon, the director of the FDA's Center for Veterinary Medicine, recently spoke at an industry conference and said pentobarbital in pet food may be more pervasive than they originally thought.
The FDA announced the recall of more than 100 million cans of dog food in the wake of our investigation that found the euthanasia drug pentobarbital in Kibbles and Bits, Gravy Train, Skippy, and Old Roy wet foods. More than 8 months later, the FDA's investigation is still ongoing, but with a troubling revelation. At a recent industry conference, the industry journal Pet Food Industry reported that Dr. Stephen Solomon, the director of the agency's Center for Veterinary Medicine, said about the euthanasia drug, quote, new evidence is showing it may be a much more pervasive problem in the animal food supply than originally thought, end quote. He went on to say he was surprised at what was uncovered and considered the findings to indicate the issue was back in full force. Solomon said, quote, Pentobarbital simply should not be found in pet food. The American public, especially pet owners, demand this of us as regulators. They deserve to know the comforting fact that their animal's food does not contain a substance that is intentionally used to euthanize animals, end quote. Solomon said the FDA is currently working to address the problem of pentobarbital in pet food and updating old policies and prevention controls. And of course, we are continuing to follow the FDA investigation closely. We requested an interview with Dr. Solomon, who was unavailable today.